Hi, my name is M.K. McDaniel. My friends call me Kathy. I'm in Gig Harbor, Washington, and I've got a story to tell. About 23 years ago, I was contacted by my best friend who said that he had discovered he had leukemia. I was shocked, and I said, "How can I help?" And he says, "Well, they've given up here where I am in Chicago, but they're sending me up to Seattle, Washington, to a research hospital, and they're going to use experimental drugs, and they're hoping to save me." Well, he was only 53 years old and in perfect health before this, and I was completely surprised and horrified at the same time. I had recently sold my business and had moved, so I wasn't really tied down to anything. I flew up to Seattle. I found an apartment that was just a couple blocks from the hospital. He brought with him from Chicago another caregiver. And they told us at the instruction period that we'd be there probably 2 or 3 months, and all the medical procedures we'd have to learn to do at home. And we got ready, and it turned into about 9 months after it was all said and done. He would get well, and then he would start to fail again, and they'd try something new. And we'd be up all hours. The other lady and I took 8-hour shifts, finally going back and forth from the hospital. Sometimes we'd pass each other at 3 o'clock in the morning in downtown Seattle, and we didn't care. I told her one time, she says, "Aren't you getting frightened?" I says, "No, I am in such a bad mood. Somebody better be careful if they run into me." And so we were just completely dedicated to this. And then he died. There was nothing more they could do, and he passed away. I was a complete physical, mental, spiritual wreck. I really didn't have any job or place to go back to. I gave notice to the people I was staying with that I'd be leaving. And then I got sick. I picked up some sort of flu that was going around. I know that my immune system was shot, but it very quickly developed into something a little scary. And by the time I had the wherewithal to get to a little emergency room place a couple miles away, my friend took me, and I collapsed before I could even get into the office. They found no pulse. They, I'm told, put me in an ambulance, took me to a hospital nearby, and put me into the intensive care unit. I woke up a couple days later wondering where I was. I was in an oxygen tent, and I thought that was odd. And there was my family. They'd come in from California and Colorado, and they told me that I was really sick. The doctors they'd done everything they could. They were going to have to put me into a drug-induced coma because they were going to do some experimental things that I probably didn't want to know about. Anyway, I wasn't given much of a choice. The last thing I remember is the ball going down on the television. They were watching New Year's Eve on 1999. And my dad gave me a thumbs up. I gave him one back, and it went black. Oop, gotta back up just a minute. The last thing the doctor had said to me was, "Okay, we're going to put you into this drug-induced coma using anesthetic. It is called white amnesia, and you will be unable to remember anything that happens to you in this coma. We're going to be doing some stuff you don't want to remember, but your mind is just kind of going to go offline." Okay? So with that caveat, I did get the medication and was gone. Well, I don't know how much later, but I became conscious, and it was totally black. There was no sound, and I didn't know if I'd been put in a closet as a joke or what. I just sat there and thought, well, I don't even know if I'm sitting or standing. I'm afraid to move. And I waited and I waited. And all of a sudden, it seemed to me that it was getting kind of a reddish glow in the distance. And I thought, oh, maybe the sun's coming up. That's good. I'll find out where I am. But as it got lighter, it was still kind of this fog, and it was rolling around so that you couldn't really see what was behind it. And I was paying close attention to that when all of a sudden, out of this fog comes this noise, this voice. It was something I'd never heard before that said, "Do you know where you are?" My mind is racing and I'm going through possibilities, and all I can come up with is hell. And this voice boomed back with a blah sort of laugh that you hear in a horrible movie. And I was freaked. And so I turned and I ran into the darkness. Next thing I know, bright lights come up. And I'm looking around. I have no idea where I am, but I can see through, again, this sort of fog. It's not reddish now, it's blackish and gray. And there's buildings, but it looks like there's been a bomb. They're fallen over. There's windows blown out. There's screaming. There's fires. There's people running. I don't know what's going on. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in a dangerous situation. I have to get somewhere safe. And so I tucked in between a great big piece of concrete and I hid. And as I observed what was going on through the smoke, I could see sometimes people and hear funny noises. And when I called out to someone thinking I could join a group or maybe some people were getting together, I was told, "We are all alone here." I was frightened. I thought I'd better find a place that was a little safer. And I went running into this quasi darkness and tried to climb up a piece of concrete. But as I did, I fell backwards. And I closed my eyes, waiting for the terrible crash. But all of a sudden, when I opened my eyes, the lights had come up again, and I was in a completely different scenario. And I thought, what is going on? But as I looked, there was like a stage. Maybe I was in a theater or something. And I thought, what's going on now? And there's these chairs, like beauty parlor chairs and stands and mirrors, and they're all canted in odd directions. And I thought, well, how did I get here? And when I looked over on the stage, there was someone I knew, someone from my family. And she was a person, she was an in-law, and she was someone that always looked perfect. You know, she was very careful to have the right makeup and the right hairdo and wonderful clothes. But she was a person you had to be careful around. She was a little on the snippy side. And I was a little afraid of her, to tell you the truth. But I thought I better, go over and ask her. Maybe she knows what's going on. Well, she took one look at me and says, "Oh my gosh, you look terrible. Get up in one of these chairs and I'll fix your hair and do your makeup." And I said, "What?" I says, "You don't know what's going on. Something really weird is going on." She's just laughed at me and said, "It'll be okay. If you look good, you are good." And I thought, this is not helpful. I said goodbye to her. I stepped off of that stage and I walked into the darkness. Next thing I know, the lights come up. And I'm standing there looking at a very tall being. It was not friendly. The word demon came into my mind, and I thought, wonder where that came from. But he was gruff and mean, and he asked me, he says, "Do you want to get out of here?" I said, "Of course I do. Why?" And he says, "Well, I've got a job for you." And I said, "A job?" This was getting stranger and stranger. And he put his hand up, and as far as I could see, it was blackberry bushes, great big, tall, interweaving spines with those big thorns on them. And I looked in horror at this whole thing, and I thought, well, there's no way I could get through that. And he says, "All you have to do is just cut those down, and then I'll see that you get out of here." Well, where I live, I've had a lot of experience with those bushes, and you need your proper equipment to keep from getting scratched up. And those thorns just take a lot of work, even if you've got sharp scissors. But I felt something appear in my hand, and there was a pair of those scissors that children use to cut paper when they're in kindergarten. And he just laughed at me. I got angry. I thought, you can't push me around like this. I am going to get this done, and then I'm going to get out of here. So I got into the bushes, which were starting to already scratch me, and I started gnawing on one of these canes. And I was gnawing and gnawing because the scissors weren't sharp, but I finally broke one off and I went to put it behind me. And when I turned back around, oh my goodness, this thing grew back to where it was. And I looked up at that thing and he was just laughing so hard. He thought that was hilarious. And that got me even madder. So I went down to the ground and I started gnawing again. But the lights went out. And when the lights came back up, I was on this road. That's the only word for it. It was dirt and it had rocks on it, but it only went two directions, left and right. And ahead was just this horizon as far as you could see, just dirt and rocks and that reddish glow at the horizon. There were no stars, no moon, no nothing. And, I was beginning to think, this is so weird. But the thought that I was dead never crossed my mind. I could not explain where I was, but I felt just like me. I had the same sensations of being me. I've had people say, well, did you look down and see your feet? Well, no. How many times a day do you do that? I mean, I just felt like me, and I was walking and I was talking. So I took a right on this road. I thought, no signs. I might as well just go to the right like I'm going on the freeway. And I started walking and walking and walking and walking. But all of a sudden, I started smelling something good. And I thought, oh, again, not knowing I didn't have a body, I thought I was tired and I was hungry and I needed something to drink. I was dusty in the throat. And I just thought, I'll hurry up here and see what's above there, because it was all kind of dark. So I got there and I look, and there's this woman who's preparing all these meals and putting them on this table, the big tables, like there was going to be a banquet. And she was just getting everything fancied up. And I looked, and again, it was someone I knew, another relative, someone I was so close to. And so I thought, oh, thank heavens. I asked her, I called her name. She looked up, but she didn't seem to recognize me. And I said, oh, I see that you're really busy, but I'm really hungry and thirsty. If you just got a little plate of anything, I'll be happy to have it, maybe a small glass of water. And she looked at me with disgust and says, oh, this food is for important people. Zing, that hurt. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And I got back on the road. I was walking and walking and walking and walking. And it got dark. It came up. And it was white, bright light. And I thought, white. Oh, I'm smelling antiseptic. Oh, it's turned into like walls and floors, not just open white space. And I thought hospital. I'm in oh, heavens, there'll be people here. There's lots of doors. I bet I can find a way out. And as I'm looking back and forth, I see a door to the right, a door to the left, and straight ahead. Oh no, it was another one of those demons. And he'd spotted me and he started running down the hall. And I turned to the right and I turned to the left, and he's there. And he's got another club. And I just looked, and he said, so you've got a new job. And I said, what is it now? And he says, you go into that room over there, you pick up the garbage or whatever they've got, that'll give you, you go across the hall into that room over there and you put it down, you come back, you go over, that's your new job. I'll be here to keep an eye on you. So I thought, well, I'd be out of his sight. I'd go in the room. Maybe there was somebody in there that could help me or show me the back door. So I went into this room and I was surprised. I could see all these gurneys there and people laying on them with sheets across their chest, but they were situated such that there were doctors or somebody sitting on stools at the bottom of the gurneys. The legs of the patients were splayed, and I thought, what is going on? And then all of a sudden, one of the doctors waved his hand up, and I stared, and he turned around and yelled at me to get over there. And I thought, oh, job, right. So I go running over and put my hands out, and he had been doing, spoiler alert here, an abortion on this lady, and he gave me what was left of the baby, and I completely freaked out, and he said, go. And I went into the hall and looked at the demon, and he said, door on the left. And so I went in there and was absolutely overcome with the smell and the sight of this room just full of piles of what was left of those babies. And I put the baby down and I went across into the hall, and he said, right door. And I said, no, I can't do this. That's disgusting. It's awful, and I won't. And he said, oh, you don't say that here. And I said, well, I'm not going to do it. And he picked up that club and says, you know what? It always gets worse. And I just shut my eyes. I'm back on the road. I'm walking, this endless walking. At one point I says, I think this is a treadmill. It doesn't seem to get anywhere. It's endless. And I'm walking and walking. And up above, I'm thinking, oh, that looks like people milling around up there. With what's been going on, I'm not going to say right off the bat that's a good thing. And so I kind of crept down the road. It was kind of dark. Well, I can't get off the road. These people are walking back and forth, and I need to get through to get on the other side, because I can't just take off. I just can't take off. I feel better on this road. So I thought, well, as I got closer, I noticed they were kind of, I don't know, it was weird. They were like limping or bumping into each other, or dressed in rags and making weird noises like growling. And I thought, oh, I don't even know what that is, but that looks dangerous. So I thought, well, the only way I might be able to get through is if I try and act like I'm one of them. So I kind of slowed my gait and kind of limped along, kind of gurring under my breath, and kept my eyes down so that they wouldn't notice me. So I got about halfway through this crowd of about, 20 people going back and forth. I didn't really look up to see their faces. And all of a sudden, they all froze. I had to stop too. And I thought, what's going on? And I thought, oh no, they've noticed me. Something gave me away, and I don't know what it is. But I did notice they started moving with purpose. And the ones that had like shawls on and skirts went to the outside. And that just left the men inside. And they went around me and all staring at me and making those noises. And I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden they started pushing at me. And one guy hit me in the chest, and I fell onto the ground, and they were kicking me. And then they did unspeakable things that I really don't want to talk about. And after a while, they backed up, and one of them leaned over and said, we're all sick. We've got AIDS. And now you've got it too. And you will never die. You'll just get sicker and sicker. And he backed up. And I just sat there and I thought, how can this get any worse? I'm really getting discouraged. I'm wondering if I'm ever going to get out of here. And this woman, quasi-demon, came up and said, you're one of us. Get up. So at least it was feminine. It wasn't one of those guys. So I got up and got my clothes together, and she led me over to another group. And there was probably about, 12 other ladies that had probably been through what I had. And she says, okay, follow me. And we came out of a dark spot as we filed along, one behind the other. And all I could see then, as far as the eye could see, was ice and snow and freezing wind. And none of us were dressed too well. And we just started walking. And as we started walking, it started to snow. And we walked for an incredibly long time, one behind the other. All I know is by the time we got to this horrible cabin thing, I guess was where we were going, we had snow up to our chests and we're trudging behind one another. So it was an incredibly long time. Again, no time there, but she led us into this shack and it had no insulation. It was freezing and cold. And we were sitting on the floor, just kind of trying to huddle one another and get some warmth. And she says, okay, now we wait for customers. And we looked at each other and thought, oh my gosh, this is just awful. And I said to her, I've been here what seems like a very long time, and I can't believe how heavy and depressing, and what's going on? Is there something I'm not catching, And she says, oh, well, it's Christmas on Earth, and that's always the worst day in hell. I thought, hell? And it should have been obvious, but I was fighting it, I guess, and I couldn't believe it. I just sat there and I got mad again. I thought, I don't know how I got here, but this isn't right. And I'm just not going to put up with it. So I thought, Christmas, huh? Okay, this will get her goat. And I started singing my favorite Christmas carol, which was Away in the Manger. And I started in Away in a Manger. And she turned around and said, shut up. And the other ladies started singing with me too. No crib for his bed. And she says, I mean it, shut up. She raised her own club. And then I said, the little Lord. And she shrieked and she jumped at me. And I closed my eyes and the lights went out. And then the lights came up. The light was warm and welcoming and blissful. And I was filled with this love and joy, and everything that had happened before was just gone in my mind. And I was just relishing this swimming in love was all that I could just, there were no words for it. It was just marvelous. And as I looked through the light, I could see that it was kind of starting to move back and give some form. And again, I was in a white area, but it looked like a cathedral inside, and it was beautiful. And all of a sudden I looked forward and there was my friend, my best friend, who had just died the month before. And he looked great. Before with the leukemia, he'd lost all his hair and he was all blotchy and purple. One eye was all infected, but he looked wonderful. He looked better than he did when he was 53. He looked like he was about 35, and he had this big grin on his face and just a twinkle in his eye, like, I know something you don't know. And I thought, I know that you're dead and you don't know it. And I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, I'm not going to be the one to tell him. And then he really started laughing. And I thought, all right, if he's dead, I must be dead. And I'm in heaven and I'm with him. And it doesn't get any better than this. And I was so happy. And as I was looking around, I was confused because it was just like white. And I thought, wait a minute, aren't there supposed to be angels and, rainbows and stuff? And I looked over and I did see, strange, it was a great big table with a huge book on top of it. And the book was open halfway. And I remembered he was showing me something in that book. And all I could remember is I said, oh no, that's going to be too hard. I want to stay here with you. And then I looked back up at him and he'd gotten closer, but not close enough to touch. And he said, now, Mary Kay, you've got too much left to do. I thought, oh my gosh, they're throwing me out. No, I just crossed my arms and stomped my foot like a 2-year-old. And I said, no. Next thing I know, the lights went down and the lights came up. And I think because I was so angry, they didn't want to send me back right away. I was kind of in a timeout or something, but I was in a meadow, lovely meadow, nothing like heaven, but I was walking along this stream. I think that was the stream to take me back to where I needed to go. I met a couple people there and they kept encouraging me to go down the stream. And then all of a sudden the lights went out. I was getting tired of that. And the lights came up, and they're bright, and they're too bright, and there's people milling around and noise, and I can't move. And I'm thinking, oh no, I'm back in hell. And then one of the people turns around and says, Mom's back. I thought, what? And then my mom and dad turn around, and my daughter runs over, and she sits down and says, oh, Mom, you've been so sick. We thought we'd lost you, but you're back. And I thought, why can't I move? Why can't I talk? And of course, I had the ventilator and all that trach and all that stuff, and I had lost. After 3 weeks in a coma and a nasal tube, I was down to 87 pounds, I guess it was. And I had no muscle mass left, so I couldn't move anything. The next day, the doctor found that I could move this finger and blink. And they didn't know how long that was going to take for me to recover if I continued to recover. So I'm given all this really bad news, but they're all so happy that I'm back. It was really a blessing that I couldn't talk, because I probably would have been very angry with them. They told me that they had a prayer circle going around the world that brought me back. And I was not happy to be there at all, understandably. I overheard the doctor later saying, we don't know how brain damaged she is, but she probably won't work or drive a car, and she's going to need help. I was 53 years old. I had been a very independent person, and this was not good news. It took me, I was 4 weeks in ICU. They finally sent me to a physical rehab facility for a month. I stayed in that hospital trying to learn how to walk and talk and go up and down stairs, button, swallow. I was like an infant. I had to learn everything all over again, which was very humiliating. A fellow that I had been dating asked me to marry him while I was there, because it was, they said, you've got nowhere to go. You can go live with your parents. And he was in love with me, and, he was a good man. I took him up on it. And so he helped me get my nobody wanted to hear about the experience. They said, oh, it was the drugs. Oh, it was a dream. And I said, but the doctor told me I could remember nothing in that coma. Why is it all just won't go away? So it took about 10 years before I found the group IONS, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies in Seattle. And I went to some meetings, and of course, all the near-death experiences I heard were angels and rainbows and talking to Jesus and all of that stuff. And I felt like I didn't belong. So I eventually did find a couple of books from other people that had the distressing near-death experiences. And I hung in there. And finally, people kept telling me I needed to write a book about that because there wasn't that much information out. So 2.5 years ago, I finished the book. It took me 20 years to write, and it's been published. And I'm still a member of IONS, and I've got a mission in life to explain to people how not to go to hell, because of my upbringing. I was a Catholic. I was always taught from a very early age that I would go to purgatory after I died, that only Mother Teresa went, straight up. The rest of us had to go suffer in purgatory. So I firmly believe that I manifested that experience for myself. And so I encourage people to skip the trip. God is all loving, all forgiving, and never condemns anybody. So anytime you believe something firmly enough, you can cause that to manifest. So I'm just saying, just believe me, there's no judgment after death. There is usually a life review. I wasn't there long enough to get one, but the people in IONS all say there is a life review. It's not a judgment. I was taught when I got back, I kept pleading with God, I don't ever want to go there again. Please, I don't want any thou shalt nots. Give me something positive that I can do every day and that I can tell people. And he said to be loving and kind, merciful, forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful. So that's my daily mantra now. And that's the message that I try and bring to people. Thank you.